And today we are talking about graduating from law school and doing something completely different. For this guest, he did not take the safe route. He opened up his law firm right after law school.
Like you said, we literally started from scratch. We didn't have the experience of working for a big-time law firm. I mean, we literally hung a shingle right out of law school. Honestly, it was a mix of a lot of different things, right? A lot of faith, timing. There was a lot of frustration as well. I knew what it felt like to work hard for somebody else's dream. So when I graduated, I figured, why not bet on myself? I didn't have the luxury of learning, under someone else's umbrella. I was the attorney, the receptionist, the bookkeeper, right? All in one. You're often underestimated before you even speak, right? You walk into rooms where no one looks like you, and you can feel the weight of representation, right? But instead of resenting it, I use it as fuel, right? To show up prepared, polished, and unapologetically myself. I think hustle gets you started, but systems keeps you standing. I think relationships are worth more than revenue.
The lawyers have souls too because... Hi everyone, welcome back to Lawyers Have Souls Too. My name is Winnie Jean-Pierre. I am your host. And today we have a special guest. He's not only an attorney, but he is a colleague. We went to law school together, so that's going to be interesting. And today we are talking about graduating from law school and doing something completely different. For this guest, he did not take the safe route. He opened up his law firm right after law school, which we know is a huge challenge. We will be talking about that. And we'll talk about the challenges, the lesson. We'll talk a little bit about law school since we went to the same school. We'll talk about his journey to being a rookie and to now being a successful attorney. And we have Lenny. Welcome, Lenny. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Winnie. This is really an honor and a privilege to be on your podcast. I am super proud of you and what you've built so far with this platform. So I'm super excited to be here. So for those that don't know me, my name is Lenny Rodriguez. I'm a managing partner with Rodriguez and Williamson. We've got offices in Tampa, Orlando, and Miami. And yeah, like you said, we literally started from scratch. We didn't have the experience of working for a big time law firm. I mean, we literally hung a shingle right out of law school, and I am so glad that we did.
And what are your practice area?
So we practice primarily personal injury, right? So auto accidents, slip and fall, truck accidents, things like that. And we also do criminal defense.
Okay. And for my viewers, they have several locations in Florida. So if you're in Florida, we'll talk about that at the end. You might need to reach out to them if you need their services. All right, let's jump right in. What inspired you to go to law school?
Oh man, going to law school, we're not, at least myself, I'm not the traditional student, right? I went to law school in my late 30s. I want to say maybe even 40.
Wait, you're not like 30 right now, Lenny? I thought you just turned 31. No?
No. I am a mature, let's say middle-aged man, if you will, right? With two lovely boys, right? A 16-year-old and an 11-year-old. But it was kind of crazy why I started, going to law school. My initial intent of going to law school was to be a corporate attorney. I worked in banking for many, many years, 20 plus years. I started my career in New York City with JP Morgan Chase, and I ended my career 20 plus years later at Citibank here in Tampa. And one of the reasons why I wanted to go to law school was because the type of work that I was doing at the bank, and I was dealing with a lot of regulators, right? Banking regulations and things like that. And I found myself working with many corporate attorneys. And to come to find out, I knew a lot more than they did. right? Which typically happens, right? It's kind of funny how that works, but I looked at them and I said, I was intimidated at first, right? And as I got to, work with them and know who they were, they're regular people just like us, right? They just, went to law school and got the degree, passed the bar and all that good stuff. And I thought, you know what? I think this is something I can do, right? If they can do it, I can do it. And I think for me, it was just being exposed to attorneys that leveled me up, right? That made me want to go to law school, get the JD and take the bar exam. So I think just working with other attorneys that got me motivated to go to law school.
That's great. So before we dive into your journey as a now successful, law firm manager, let's get a little bit personal. We went to law school together. So what is your first memory of me? What do you remember? How did we meet?
So I remember one time, and I'll never forget this, and you probably don't remember this. I forget what class it was. I don't know if it was contracts or I don't remember what the class was. But as you know, in law school, right? Many of the students are very pretentious. It's a very competitive environment, right? Everybody is trying to best everybody else in booking classes, getting the highest grade. It's all about GPA, all that stuff. And when you miss a day of school, right, there's a lot of, it hurts, right? You lose a lot of information. There's a lot of little nuances that you missed, right? And I remember I came the next day to that class and you came up to me and you emailed me your notes from the class that I missed. And it was probably something second nature to you being nice, but you don't know how much I appreciated you sending me your notes from that class. Nobody else, not even none of my friends that were in the class, really took notes like that, but you really helped me that day. And I was so appreciative. And I don't know if I even said thank you to you because I was so in shock.
Oh, wow. So I don't remember that, but that is definitely something that I would do. I will tell you what I do remember in terms of, how we come about. I think I did an episode where I say, hey, we started with like 90 students. It was very intimidating and to look around and, about 20 of us graduated. So law school was definitely tough. And I think for me, I'm the friendly but reserved person. Like I'm super nice, but then like I kind of stay to myself a little bit. But for me, I always think about because I think that's one thing that a lot of people knew, but not everyone knew. I was a single mom and working. So I always try to look out for people that are in the same position as me. I knew that you work, that's for sure. I knew that you work and that you had a family. So I kind of pay attention to these little things like, that's already a lot, right? Not to say that somebody else who's single and just doesn't have anything else, are doing better, but I do know the struggle for that. So I try to just kind of put myself in other people's shoes. Like, would I want somebody to take notes for me and send them to me? Yes. So that was probably the reason why I did that because again, I know it was super competitive and this and that and the third, but I do know that, and I was very much aware that everybody's situation was different. Everybody's situation was different, and that's something that I took to heart, and that's something that I also respected because I can relate to that. So that was that. Aw.
Yeah, there were people in our class, right, single moms that would bring their kids to class. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
There were, single mothers. They didn't have, childcare, or maybe the dad wasn't available, or whatever the case might be. And the law school really accommodated us, but I think more than anything, we had a really nice mix of students in our class, right? We had young 20-something year olds. We had 30-year-olds, we had 40-year-olds, and I think we even had 50 and 60-year-olds in our class.
We did. We did.
And it was a very diverse group, right? We had, obviously Latino, Caribbean, we had Black, white, Asian, right? We had a really nice mix, and I think it worked. I think it worked for us, and we obviously all got through it. And here we are, right?
I agree. I agree. Well, that was great. It's always good to kind of hear that. Just looking back how things were for us. Now let's dive in. So you graduated law school and you did something big, in my opinion. You just decided to open your law firm. So what inspired you to start your own law firm right after law school?
Oh man, honestly, it was a mix of a lot of different things, right? A lot of faith, timing, there was a lot of frustration as well, right? As I mentioned before, I mean, I spent over, 20 years in corporate banking before law school. And most recently I managed multi-million dollar projects and compliance programs, right, globally. I knew what it felt like to work hard for somebody else's dream. So when I graduated, I figured, why not bet on myself, right? I didn't want to wait 10 years to work for a big law firm, for an opportunity to be a partner, or get boxed into somebody else's system, right? I wanted to build something rooted in family, faith, obviously justice, and those values reflect who I am as a person and how I serve my clients. But I think more the most impactful thing was there was another student, and you probably remember him, Jay Abercrombie, who told me, Lenny, why not open your own thing, man? Like you're a hard worker, you're a hustler, you'll make it. Trust me, I believe in you. And it took me a while to kind of absorb that. But towards the end of law school, I was fully confident, right? And I did what I did. We hung a shingle and we opened up our own firm right out of law school.
Yes. So, of course, what were the biggest challenges you face as, a new attorney with limited experience running a law firm?
I mean, everything was a challenge, right? I didn't have a lot of money, right? To launch the firm. I didn't have the luxury of learning, under someone else's umbrella. I was the attorney, the receptionist, the bookkeeper, right? All in one. I think the hardest part of building the firm was getting the credibility, right? Getting clients to trust me, when my name wasn't known yet, right? I mainly leaned on hustle and humility. I wasn't afraid to ask questions, stay late, and learn fast, right? So I think the biggest challenge with any business, not just a law firm, right? It's the credibility part. People don't know you. They don't know what you've done because you haven't done anything, right? You don't have the history to prove it. So I think that was the biggest challenge for me, credibility.
Did you have any mentor at the time who helped and support you throughout this journey?
Yes, I did have an attorney who was also a a colleague in law school, but his older brother, of all people, was kind of my mentor. He was in the business for 20 plus years, and our colleague Jay Abercrombie kind of pulled me into that circle, to meet his brother, and he said, "Look, whatever you need, I don't care what it is. I've been through what you've been through. I've been through your struggles, and I will help you to make sure that you get through this." And that gave me all the confidence in the world to even make mistakes, right? Because I knew that I had somebody that would kind of keep me aligned and tell me what I needed to do in order to, get through a particular situation. So, yeah, I definitely had a mentor, and I highly suggest that new attorneys or entrepreneurs find that person to kind of help them through the hard times.
Yeah, that's important. Now, you are a father and you have a family. How do you balance being an attorney, running the business, and also, taking care of your family at the same time?
I mean, my personal opinion, I think balancing is a myth, right? I think rhythm is real. Some days the business takes priority, right? Some days my son's baseball games take priority, right? So I just try to be fully present wherever I am, right? The trick is to set priorities, not just schedules. And I think that's what's helped me, get through, tough times, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. What sacrifices did you make for your career, and what sacrifices did your family have to make for you?
Well, as I mentioned before, right, I was, I was a senior man, I was a vice president, right, at Citibank. And I was in a cushy job making six figures. And I opted to leave that comfort to do this, right? So I think the biggest, sacrifice that I made was basically sacrificing my own career that I built for 20 years, right? I mean, obviously, I missed dinners, I missed vacations, I missed some of my son's baseball games, and the biggest thing, I lost a lot of sleep. Yeah, I mean, my family sacrificed time and stability while I built the foundation, right? But we did it together. They understood the mission, and now they share the pride in what's been built.
So you mentioned your son baseball game often. Um, I follow you. I know that, that's something that's dear to your heart and to your family. How do you set boundaries between your personal life and professional life so you can make sure that you are there to support your son specifically?
I'm still learning, right? I try to set a hard stop in the evening and keep weekends for families, right? But in this business, emergencies happen. The key is transparency, letting my family know when the firm needs me and letting the firm know when my family does, right? But I'm still learning. It's kind of a work in progress, and as an entrepreneur, it's tough to create those boundaries because emergencies do happen in business.
I saw a video that you posted the other day about being a minority attorney and being mistaken for this. I always ask, my guests about this, and I just love to hear the different stories. I think because a lot of time the people who don't experience that, it just sound crazy to them, like, what, they thought you were the secretary or the paralegal? How? Let's talk a little bit about that. As a minority attorney, what unique challenges do you face and how do you overcome them?
You're often underestimated before you even speak, right? You walk into rooms where no one looks like you, and you can feel the weight of representation, right? But instead of resenting it, I use it as fuel, right? To show up prepared, polished, and unapologetically myself, right? I'll never forget the time when I first started, right? I was representing a criminal defense client, and I show up, and when you first show up, right, there's an aisle, and then there's two banks of seats, right? And I kind of, me, I'm a little timid and kind of quiet and shy sometimes. I kind of sat in the back, right? I sat in the back, and I didn't realize that all of the attorneys kind of sit in the front and on the left hand side, right? This is kind of unspoken rules, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm kind of by myself, and the bailiff goes, the defendants sit over here. And I'm like, I'm not a defendant, I'm an attorney. He's like looking at me, he's like, are you the attorney? Who are you the attorney for? Like, he didn't believe me, right? And then he said, well, if you're an attorney, you sit over there. So that was kind of my welcome to the profession moment,
I know.
really. So yeah, that was an interesting time there.
What does representation means to you in the legal profession? And, what do you hope your story inspires other to do that are of similar background?
I mean, representation is everything, right? I mean, when clients see a lawyer that looks like them, speaks their language, understands their story, it changes how they see justice, right? They feel comfortable. If you understand the culture and everything that goes around it, people feel much more comfortable with you. So I think I want young lawyers from underrepresented backgrounds to know that you belong in every room that you walk into, right? And you know, there's a little bit of kind of that imposter syndrome, right? That you feel, at least I do, because I was never given that opportunity. But I think, clients love to see attorneys look like them. They just feel much more comfortable. So representation means everything to me because of that.
Looking back, what would you tell your law school graduate self um, if you could talk to him today?
Oh man. Um, I guess the biggest thing is, don't wait for permission, right? Nobody's coming to save you. You already have everything you need, right? It's discipline, it's purpose. It's things that they don't even teach you in law school, right? Grit, right? These are things that just come from you, right? But yeah, I would say don't wait for permission. Just go after it, right? Kind of like what you've done with your platform here, right? You just kind of went after it, right? Nobody kind of told you. You just kind of it came from you, and you know, um, it's why wait, right? Just go for it.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Um, Talking about, you know, what they don't teach you in law school, what is one thing that you think is essential? If you had a magic wand and you said this is something that needs to be taught in law school, what would it be?
Well, as you probably know, right, law school doesn't prepare you for the bar exam. It doesn't prepare you for real world practice. It doesn't prepare you to deal with the difficult client, right? It doesn't prepare you for the client that doesn't pay you, right? It doesn't prepare you for real things that I think that they should teach in law school, right? But I think more than anything, right, it's just being a people person, right? Um, People don't need lawyers until they need you, if that makes sense, right? And, people, I understand that the law profession is one of those professions where a lot of lawyers are hated, right? Because they seem to be crooks, or they take your money and they don't really do what they're supposed to. But at the end of the day,
Did you watch the second episode of this podcast? What?
yeah, at the end of the day, we need lawyers, right? I mean, when you're in jail and you feel like it's been an injustice, who are they going to call, right? They're going to call an attorney. But I think, you know, people skills, right? Emotional intelligence, right? That's a term that has been thrown around quite a bit these days, right? Um, you can't be cold, right? I think people want to feel that warmth from the attorney that everything's going to be okay. And those are things that I think should be, pushed more, right? The human side of things. It's not it's not all just black and white.
I love that. I love that. What are you most proud of when you think about how far you've come?
Building something from nothing. Right? I mean, my parents were attorneys. I mean, the highest level of education was maybe high school, right? So building something from nothing and doing it the right way, right? I mean, we've helped countless number of families. We've given jobs to good people, right? We've got paralegals, we've got, a marketing team, all of that, right? And we've always kept our integrity intact. And I think, the other part is, we do a lot for the community as well, right? I sit on a board of directors for an organization out in Lakeland that they mentor young underprivileged youth to give them an opportunity to play a sport that they love, right? And youth sports today is incredibly expensive, right? With equipment, just fees, insurance, all these things, and giving kids an opportunity to play a sport and kind of level the playing field, right? And kind of showing them that, look, this is an opportunity that you can do, in high school, in college, and maybe at the professional level, right? So we have avenues to kind of help underprivileged kids, reach those goals.
Yeah, that's great. Um, what legacy do you hope to leave for your family and your community?
Um, Yeah, that's something where it's dear to my heart because it's directly connected to my family and my kids, right? Um, I want my kids to see that you can build something great without losing your soul, right? Not working, 100 hours a week for somebody else, right? Um, so I think building something great without using losing your soul. For my community, I want to prove that excellence and authenticity can coexist, right? That we can lead from both the heart and from the hustle, right? So I think those are key points there as far as legacy is concerned.
Yes, you are dropping gems. How do you define success today? And how has definition changed from this time you started?
I think initially, I was looking at it, at the legal profession strictly from a monetary perspective, right? When people think of lawyers, they think of fancy cars, private jets, right? All of that stuff that's sensationalized, on social media or TV or movies. But as you work in the profession, and as you represent clients and understand their story, a lot of them are underprivileged, at least the ones that I would say the majority of the clients that I've represented are underprivileged. And you're like, wow, like how do these people even survive not knowing certain things and kind of pulling them through the system and showing them, look, this is how we're going to do things and guiding them through the process, for me should be success, right? It's not monetary. I think the bigger impact is the legacy that you leave, with the family and their children, right? So that's kind of success for me. And I think, traditionally it's all about, the money. But for me, I think it's changed over the years.
Yeah, so because this is Lawyers Have Souls too, and without even you knowing, you talk about souls in several of the sentences. You mentioned, how to be successful without losing your souls. What grounds your soul when the legal grounds get heavy? I mean, you're a criminal law attorney, so I know it gets pretty tough.
Yeah, I mean, what grounds my soul in when it gets heavy, right? I think for me, it's faith first, right? Family always, right? And remembering where I started, right? It's really to serve and not necessarily to impress, right? I'm not a young attorney, right? I'm a middle-aged, man, right? So for me, back in my 20s, it was about the fancy car and the fancy suits and stuff like that, right? But it's not to impress at this point, right? When I lose sight of that, I unplug, pray, cook, or even hit a baseball game, right? That's therapy for the soul. At least for me, it is.
That's great. Well, we can shift gear a little bit. Talk about hobbies. What are your hobbies?
I love to travel. You've probably seen me putting pictures, different places.
I've seen.
This year has been a really good year for me as far as family time is concerned. Went to Turkey earlier in the year. Went to the Dominican Republic a couple of times this year. Went out to the West Coast to San Francisco. So for me, traveling, I love traveling. And I think for young kids, it's also a good thing because it opens the mind, right? Learning different cultures. I mean, I've never been to Europe. I've never been to Asia. And when I went to Turkey, I went to both, right? Istanbul, half of it is Asia, half of it is Europe, right? So for me, understanding those cultures, and the interesting part is when they saw my younger son, they were in shock, right? Because he had a blonde afro, he had light eyes, kind of my complexion. They were like, wow, like we've never seen this before, right? So it was kind of eye-opening for my kids too, right? To eat, falafel and baklava and, things that we've never tried here in the States, right? So, um, I would say travel for me is probably right up there as one of the most important things that I love to do with my family.
I love that. What is next for you and your firm?
I think you know, uh, it's gonna be expansion with intention, if that makes sense. More offices across Florida. I think for me, more community outreach, right? Um, more young lawyers mentored under our roof. I do give back to Cooley Law School, right? Sometimes they'll call me back to do a guest appearance on Zoom for a particular class or be a judge for a mock trial competition. But growth has to match purpose, right? If that makes sense. We're not chasing numbers here. I think we're more about building a legacy.
Of course, you know, this podcast is called Lawyers Have Souls Too because we want to show that other side of attorney. You mentioned a little bit earlier some misconception about attorneys. What is the biggest one for you when people, if they don't know, right? If you walk in a room and they don't know you're an attorney and they were talking about attorneys, what are some things that you hear and you're like, that is so not true?
I think, you know, non-attorneys put attorneys on a very high pedestal, right? And I understand it, right? Because we're highly educated. We speak well, we represent well, right? But, you know, especially for me, I didn't come from pedigree, right? I went to, the City University of New York for my undergrad. I do have an MBA as well. And, obviously I didn't go to Harvard Law School or Yale, Princeton or anything like that. There are, lawyers like us that are humble, we're hardworking, we understand the struggle, right? Um, and I think the misconception is that we're too good or we're too uppity, right, for the common folk, right? And I think that's the biggest misconception, because they see us dressed well, they speak well, and it's not necessarily the case. We put our pants on the same way, right? We eat food the same way, right? We're humans, right? Just because we're attorneys doesn't mean that we're any better than anybody else. And I think some people are a little intimidated by that, and I don't think they should be. Honestly, I was one of them, right? I was one of them, but I think people have the misconception that we're too high snobbity, right? For the common folk. And that's definitely not true. At least for me it is.
Yeah. So what is the I guess the biggest lesson you've learned so far about running your own law firm?
Oof. Oh man. Um, it's a lot, right? And you know, I think hustle gets you started, but systems keeps you standing, right? If that makes sense. At first I was doing everything myself. But real growth came when I started building repeatable processes, right? Intakes, automation, delegation, right? Things like that. And I think my experience has taught me that, right? A firm can't rely on adrenaline forever. And that's where burnout happens, right? I don't know if you've experienced that yet, but in the beginning we're fueling off of adrenaline, right? And hustle. Um, but at some point that runs out, right? And burnout is real. I think relationships are worth more than revenue. In this business, you're gonna meet a lot of people. And I think, the relationships that I've met in this business is gonna trickle down to my kids as well because it's given not just myself, but my kids an opportunity, in the future. So relationships you could never, discount or your relationships with people. And lastly, your reputation is your currency, right? If you don't have a good reputation, whether that's on Google reviews or let's be honest, when you get hired, I guarantee you they're looking you up.
Oh, they are. They are.
They are looking you up. They're looking at your social media. They're looking at your Google reviews on the Better Business Bureau. I mean, the Florida Bar website to see if you have any complaints. Believe me, you're being,
I say should.
yeah, as they should, right? So I think, again, your reputation is everything and it's your currency in any business, not just, the legal profession.
All right. Lenny, this went way better than I expected. Oh my gosh. Like, I can have like 20,000 wills from everything that you said. So inspiring. Thank you so much for being a guest. And the last question is not really a question, it's just you going to finish my sentence. And it says, lawyers have souls too because.
We are human. We are human just like everybody else, right? Um, I need sleep. I need a drink every once in a while, right? So we are human beings just like anybody else. Lawyers do have souls, right? And I think we need to kind of give ourselves a little bit of grace here, right? Um, you know, we make mistakes, right? I mean, we're human. We're human, right? I think that's the biggest takeaway here. We're not machines. We're not AI. We're not any of that. We are humans. We have feelings. We have families, and I think people need to realize that.
Perfect. Now, how do we find you? How do people follow you? Where are you located? Your website, social media handles?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm on Instagram, lawyer Len, right? So we've got a pretty good following on there. It's lawyer_Len, right? You can go to lawyerlen.com. The name of the firm is Rodriguez and Williamson, right? We handle personal injury, criminal defense cases. Our main office is in Tampa, Ybor City. We've got an office in downtown Orlando, and we've got an office in Brickell down in Miami. So we're very proud of that.
Alrighty, perfect. All right, well, thank you once again for being here. This was amazing. What a powerful reminder that success isn't always about perfect timing. Sometimes, as Laura Lynn said, it's about faith, hustle, humility, and grind. My guests today remind us that courage doesn't have, you don't have to figure it all out. You can just take a leap of faith and just go with it. If you're a lawyer or anyone trying to balance ambition with real life, I hope today's story inspire you and remind you that you're not alone. You can do it, you can build, you can grow. And again, as lawyer Lynn said, I'm calling him Lynn. His name is Lenny. Okay. But it's super important to remember two things: your reputation and building those connection, having those relationships, because that's your currency. Thank you so much for joining us. This was Lawyers Have Souls too. Until next time, we'll see you. Thank you.